a lot of people are still using AI like a chatbot. And I think despite what the rhetoric on LinkedIn about everything's agentic and blah, 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 we're nowhere near like critical mass on actual agentic workflows.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining me to talk about the 2026 AI and ABM trends. I'm really grateful to have your expertise in the report and obviously in this conversation. Very excited to talk to you and see what's really moving the market, as it were.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So I wanna dive right in, Kevin, if you don't mind. And I've asked all our other experts very similar kind of opening question. I guess it's the elephant in the room, maybe, or perhaps the big topic. AI has made it very easy for organizations to produce content for their ABM programs. It's easier than any point in history. But when every organization kind of has access to the same tools, the outputs kind of start to converge and become very similar. My question is, has this democratized content production, has it been good for the industry, or have we created a differentiation problem that we didn't have before in ABM?
Yeah, it's a great question, Aaron. I mean, I think time will tell to a certain extent, which is not a provocative answer, but I really think that the way I've seen content get, with AI support get written well is adding context and adding first party data and basically using AI as either a personalization layer or a speed layer that can be kind of reviewed human in the loop. I think that in general will probably make content more relevant and more useful for buyers, for consumers of the content. And that's probably a net good. I think on the flip side, without that context, without using it for personalization, but using it for pure content production, probably can add to noise. I think we've all seen that on the LinkedIn feed. So it's probably a little bit of both, if I had to answer honestly.
Yeah. And obviously with the noise component and adding that contextual layer to make it more personalized for the people you're targeting, the accounts that you want to break into, the data kind of like consistently shows that the organizations that are confident with AI use and actually focus on the contextual element, they're doing much better. I guess from your perspective, what makes that capability so hard to replicate? The organizations that are really winning with AI and ABM versus those who are like really struggling?
I think the biggest thing is data foundations, right? I mean, this is such an ongoing trend throughout the history of software and technology that, there's always some flashy new feature. And I think AI is now obviously within the zeitgeist that moment. But if the data foundation is not right, and specifically for ABM, I'm talking about CRM notes, call recordings, any kind of account intelligence that you can organize in a way that can be consumed by an LLM or quickly accessed by a human to help add that personalization or add that contextual element, basically lost, right? And oftentimes I've seen that companies that have their data in order are usually the ones that are more advanced, more successful anyway, right? And so I think a lot of it is just, the rich getting richer here. Like companies that are doing the right things around data to begin with are getting more value out of AI than those that weren't. And that's just kind of creating an even bigger chasm between the two. So that's been my experience. The data foundation is just key to this.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, and I feel like we saw that in the survey results as well, that the organizations who are winning, and ironically, it's like a very small minority of the ones that we actually reviewed. Something like, I think it's like 10 or maybe 20%, the ones that have that really solid foundation, they're the ones who are doing really well with AI and ABM, versus the rest of the market that's kind of like lagging along, reproducing noise as we've spoken about. And having that data infrastructure is so critical, and I feel like buying signals probably plays a key part in that as well. And kind of just shifting tax over slightly here. Obviously, a lot of organizations are able to capture signals now. There's lots of tools out there to do that. But what we're seeing is like taking action on those signals is very difficult for a lot of organizations at the moment, even with AI. And obviously in ABM, it's a very short shelf life between when a signal fires and taking action on the signal. I guess my question is, how comes AI hasn't really solved that problem for those organizations? And what does like a best in class kind of activation process look like to you?
All right, so I'll take the first question. Why hasn't AI solved this already? I think the answer is a lot of people are still using AI like a chatbot, right? So they can get the information, they can maybe even produce signal alpha, right? Like unique signals for their particular business and find that information. But being able to get that data and transpose it into action that can actually do something, meaning either influence inbound or outbound, depending on what the ABM program looks like, what your sales motion looks like. Dealing with that, I think, is much more challenging. And I think despite what the rhetoric on LinkedIn about everything's agentic and blah, 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 we're nowhere near like critical mass on actual agentic workflows that are, working and are really proliferated across marketing. So that, I think, is the biggest blocker, right? Is like if we can actually get to a point where those signals are then moving into outbound at scale or moving into inbound, meaning they're, being triggering different types of ad campaigns or event attendance or anything like that, then I think that's different. So, that's kind of the primary reason why I think AI is kind of lagging behind maybe the promise there. Remind me, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, sorry, like that a bit. So the second part of the question is what does the best in class kind of like activation program look like to you?
I think in general, it has to be multi-channel, and usually the way I break down the channels is inbound and outbound, right? Like I want the outbound personalization that's coming via email, via phone, or via LinkedIn from the sales team to match whatever the inbound experience is off of ads, microsites, events, all that type of stuff. And having multiple, avenues firing at the same time based on that signal is how you win, in my opinion. In terms of orchestrating that gets very complicated and is unique to every single business because it depends on how you're set up. And again, but I think that is really the key, is not just having it feed outbound emails or not just having those signals feed ad campaigns, but having multiple structures in place that are firing at the same time. Surround sound ABM, that's where you win.
Yeah. And kind of as a follow-on to that topic, if you don't mind, one of the things we kind of found is that the organization is doing really well with AI and ABM at the moment. They've kind of got this activation speed like down pat. They're very quick at acting on signals once they fire. But it's really something that makes it into a board presentation or a CMO's presentation. How do you get organizations to think about it as something that's at the top of the agenda, like activation speed, as a metric that we look at as something that generates the right kind of value?
Yeah. I think part of it is a cultural thing, right? Like if there is a sort of urgency within an organization, or if you can drive an urgency, you're going to have better success across the board, because especially in this day and age, like speed is key across everything, right? And it's not just a particular channel, it's not just a particular outcome, but it really needs to be a priority for your program overall. And so what does that actually look like? How do you drive that culture? I think you need to accept more risk of error, of faults, of breakdowns, because cheap, fast, and good, those are, you pick two, right? So you need to accept that you're going to have some more error if you increase speed. That's just inevitable. So how do you backstop error? How do you help your team trust that, small errors here and there can be fixed? They're not going to be the end of the world, and then kind of encourage them to move fast and break things, as much as I hate that expression. So I think that's one piece. I think the second piece, again, is like having that data foundation and the workflows clearly defined so that someone who is capturing a signal can quickly push it out. I think if you're just kind of holding these things in your head, if you don't have actual workflows defined in Lucidchart or Google, Maps, or sorry, Google Maps, Google Slides, somewhere visually that you can see, okay, this is how we take this data, this is where it goes, and then this is the output. It's going to be very difficult for the entire team to get on board with what that flow looks like. So, both on a cultural perspective and then an enablement perspective, I think those are the biggest things to delivering speed.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you, and I especially like the aspects of having that data in order, being able to visualize it in a centralized location. Everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet as well. I hate that phrase, but that consolidation is so important. And really, I want to talk a bit more about like data as a foundation, because that's another one of the themes that we kind of looked at. Ironically, despite it like being so important, it consistently comes out as one of the biggest activation bottlenecks in the report for ABM. And despite that, it kind of sits near the bottom of investment priorities. No idea why it's down there, but I think it's ranked fourth in the report. As a leader, how do you make the case for investing in the foundation rather than the tool sitting on top of it?
Yeah. A lot of times I think it's a really difficult one because we know it's important, but it's often not an area that marketing wants to invest because of the way that it's structured. Program dollars that are meant for execution or headcount dollars are typically meant for people who execute or strategize marketing campaigns. So asking for a data engineer to come join marketing when a lot of teams already have a shared resource data engineering team doesn't make a lot of sense. The way, frankly, that I've gotten it done, and I've seen my peers who are successful in getting it done, is you need to put some skin in the game. Meaning, if you can get either 10% or 15% of a shared resource, or you can get a data engineer, you need to say, we're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z better, and therefore more pipeline, more meetings, more MQLs, whatever the KPIs that leadership cares about. You need to kind of have it almost treated like a marketing campaign, right? Where you're going to produce extra results as a result of doing this. I think that is definitely something that I do think that that's a reasonable. It's a little risky. It feels a little scary, right? Because you're committing to a result based on something that's not necessarily actually going to execute on. But I do think that the speed that will enable for all of your marketing campaigns, but also the quality of the campaigns, both will go up. And in my experience, that's always produced more pipeline. So that I think is key for getting a business case made, is putting some skin in the game numbers wise.
Yeah. No, I like that, the skin in the game with the numbers wise, committing to a specific goal. Because at least then once you've achieved it, you've got a very clear representation of this is why it's successful. Fully agree. I know earlier on we spoke a bit about end-to-end kind of ABM, like full funnel sort of activation. Campaign. So what we found is like campaign-based ABM and always-on ABM kind of represent two fundamentally different sort of beliefs about how marketing should work. One built around planned activity and the other around like continuous response. So we found that the majority are still running campaigns. How do you make that shift towards an always-on kind of surround sound program, do you think? And in your experience, what's the best sort of approach?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big always-on guy, so I'm pretty biased here. I came up in marketing running these campaigns, and it would always feel like the strategy part took way too long, and then by the time you were in market, the messaging was already kind of stale, and it never ran long enough to really justify all the time investment. So having these always on and iterative motions, I think, is way more practical, way more pragmatic, and produces better results. So I'll lead with that. But how do you make the transition? I think the way you do it is by not ignoring why are campaigns important, right? Why do people like the idea of them? It's because there needs to be some output for like new thinking, new ideas that come from product management, from product marketing, all of those teams. They want to have that output so they can feel like they are getting, their, new thinking and all the work that they've done out into the market. So what I do as part of kind of running an always on program is leave space for that to happen, right? We have micro campaigns that are basically left empty, and they're anticipating there's going to be some, new motion that needs to kind of get spun up quickly. We have a kind of playbook for doing that. So I think that is really key for me. The other thing that's important is just because you're doing an always on motion, it should still follow the basic tenets of like, you have a point of view, right? And that point of view can be refined over time, but like, just doing always on with like disconnected motions that is not relevant, that is not really clean and aligned with the rest of the business, I think is a bad idea. And so the more that you can say, the campaign may be running at all times, right? But it's still leave space for those new ideas, new thinking to come in, and also it is refining and a good opportunity to get the core message kind of built for the business. I think those two things really help old school marketers who are more campaign focused to kind of see the light, because they're getting everything they want plus the speed.
Yeah. And I think that's crucial, like getting what they want plus the speed. I quite like that ending statement, because when I think about how ABM is sort of moving at the moment, a lot of organizations are kind of investing heavily in AI agents to help manage the entirety of that process. And I guess my thinking is, where does the human sort of sit nowadays in regards to the whole ABM lifecycle, particularly with your campaign-based ABM and your always on ABM? How does that look, do you think, or how will that look in the next few years?
Human in the loop, I think, is so underrated, again, compared to what you read on LinkedIn. Like, I think I'm running probably one of the more advanced AI content driven ABM programs out there, right?
Yeah.
We still have to go through pages and pages of text by hand to make sure, because hallucinations, I don't care what Claude says, I don't care what they say on TV, we're still seeing them every single day. So like, you have to be really careful of, AI is going to give you the speed, but really that is turning from content creator into reviewer, right? I almost think of I almost think of AI as sort of like an agency, right? Like, they're going to help you move faster without needing extra headcount, all that type of stuff, but you still need to have the review rounds and put those milestones in place to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do, because it doesn't understand you as well as you do, right? So that, I think, is going to be, from what I've seen from the models and the frontier, labs, is that's going to be the foreseeable future. Is like, we will still need human reviewers to really crank and focus on refining what the outputs of AI is. And that, I think, is really important for my team and how we do things today. Overall, again, I'm excited about this agentic component, right? Because if I can start to use AI more to link the signal to, a copy that we've already approved, and it's less about producing and more about connecting, it remains to be seen how realistic is that future. Like, are we 2 years away from it? Are we 10 years away from it, where we can really have these autonomous systems that don't require a lot of hand holding? I don't know, but I do think that is something that will free up marketers to, again, focus more on that content side, focus more on the strategy, and less on, I need to send an email to this person to let the salesperson know that a lead came in, or whatever. You know what I mean? That type of stuff, if we can automate that with AI, I think is going to be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I think that more of that activation component, as opposed to like the strategy and the messaging, where we can keep our focus and ensure that, it actually lands, it hits, it resonates, and then it just becomes a case of, okay, we've seen all of that, let's press a button, and that's away we go. Kevin, kind of coming towards the end of my set of questions. Looking to the future, if you had to give a piece of advice to someone working in AI and ABM strategy right now, what should they stop doing and what should they start doing, do you think?
I think I see a lot of AI use in marketing, and specifically in ABM, but I'm sure it's universal. It's sort of going at like the top of the pyramid in terms of the most important tasks. So what do I mean by that? Competitive research, or doing like deep account analysis about pain points and stuff. AI, I think, can help with some of those things, but if you purely rely on AI for that today, you are going to end up with slop. Like that higher level AI functionality is just not quite at the level that I think it needs to be production ready. So I would actually encourage a lot of people to get more pragmatic about how AI is being utilized, and think about, if I write the competitive brief, if I do the kind of foundational copywriting with the help of AI first, and then use AI to add that personalization layer, the more blocking and tackling of ABM, I think you will get better results faster, and you'll be able to scale your efficiency more than if you try and have this like fully agentic stack that you don't even have to look at, or everything's working overnight. These agents, they're always on in the middle of the night. I don't know why, but the point really is, like, get more pragmatic with your AI strategy. You're probably actually going to see more visible results that will be easier to kind of build upon, rather than getting too lofty with your goals. The other thing is acknowledging that this is scary, right? When you look at some of the outputs from these LLMs, it's hard to not think, whoa, like, this is something that would have taken me an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 2 days to produce, right? And this thing just spit it out in 15 seconds. Like, am I replaceable? I think the reality is, you have to acknowledge that fear. You have to contend with it. And the only way to kind of deal with the future is to challenge yourself and go learn how to use these tools and get the most out of them. And ultimately, I think the people that do that will be, better off. And it's to a certain extent too, I think it's very easy to get cynical because there's certain things where it will wow you, and then other parts of AI will be like just head scratchingly stupid. And if you allow yourself to say, oh, the tool is useless because occasionally the outputs are stupid, I think you miss the forest for the trees, which are like, treat it like the tool, that it is and not the tool you want it to be. And so ultimately, I think those are the two most important things. Get more pragmatic with AI and kind of just continue to challenge yourself, challenge those fears, work through them to embrace these tools and figure out how to use them.
Yeah, no, I love that, because what we also found in the research, especially around getting more pragmatic and challenging yourself and learning how to use the tools, is that when it came to the barriers in people's ABM programs, AI ABM programs, lack of skills and training was actually the foremost issue. It was a human issue, not a technological one. So it very much aligns with what you're saying. Like I think organizations need to empower their people to use the tools effectively. People need to challenge themselves to use the tools effectively. So it's a very interesting time, very scary, as you say, but also very interesting, I think. My last question, if you don't mind, Kevin, of all the tactics and tools that you've deployed in your own ABM program, what have been the most effective? I know you don't necessarily need to mention any, but what process or strategies have been the most effective for you so far?
I mean, despite the fact AI is crowding inboxes and all that type of stuff, the simple numbers game of outbound, if you can improve the outbound of your sales team and your SDR teams through an ABM approach, through personalization, through better data that's informing sequences and that type of stuff, it's just the simplest way to improve the overall results of ABM, but also really impact the business. I really fundamentally think that ABM that does not engage with outbound, does not try and make it better, does not try and arm the salespeople in that way is probably lost. So, I mean, that's one that I continually come back to and try and refine and try and refigure out, because it's just so important to the numbers. So, I mean, that's one. I think, ultimately having a destination that is personalized, that is, maybe custom for advertising has always been key. And I think, tools like user-led are enabling a lot more of that today. It doesn't always have to be microsites. It could be PDFs. It could be, like an industry page or whatever. But having that increased relevance through advertising than a growth marketing team or a demand generation team might produce, I think is always something that I've seen produce delta above and beyond, kind of normal marketing results for ABM. Those two are most important. But the other thing I would say is, like, events should be a core component of ABM. I see some ABM that's like digital only, and then I see some ABM that's like almost like field marketing, that's like really event heavy. And there's very few programs I see right down the middle that do both. And that, I think, is really key, because a lot of these journeys still require that physical in-person touch. And the more that we can get in front of customers and arm sales with those, in-person experiences where they can develop those conversations, refine account hypotheses, the better off we're going to be. So on-sites, one-to-one account days, that type of stuff, that's a core tenet of what I believe for ABM is important. So,
yeah, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today about the 2026 AI and ABM trends. Really appreciate your insights, and very thankful to have you featuring in the report.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron.